Hello, and welcome to Bandstand, the official podcast of the Tennessee Bandmasters Association. I'm your host, David Adelit, and I hope you'll join us on a journey through the past, present, and future of bands in Tennessee. We'll delve into the rich history of Tennessee bands, uncovering the hidden gems and legendary figures who shaped the state's band landscape. We'll survey the present, where you'll meet the movers and shakers of today, gaining insights from their expertise and experiences. And we'll gaze towards the future, exploring the exciting possibilities that await Tennessee's school bands. Hello, everybody. In this episode, I interview Chris Janowiak, the director of bands at Ravenwood High School in Brentwood, Tennessee. We discuss this period in Chris's life, the measures they took at Ravenwood during the lockdowns and how those measures gave them a boost in the post-COVID world, how student chamber groups impact their large ensembles, Ravenwood's upcoming performance at the Music for All National Concert Band Festival, when to begin applying to play at national level events, growing a band in numbers and quality, the importance of students listening to concert bands from other schools, onboarding rising ninth graders, Chris's background and how he got from Michigan to Tennessee, and Chris's advice to young teachers. I hope you enjoy this interview with Chris Janowiak. Chris Janowiak, welcome to Bandstand. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It's going to be fun. I'm a brand new podcaster, so, if I screw up, I'll edit it later, so it'll be okay.
I think you're doing great. You got an official microphone set up, too. So
yeah.
More than I got.
$35 on Amazon.
Killing it.
Hey, you are, like, personally and professionally just in the middle of a great stretch right now. I mean, the band won the Contest of Champions last year. You're playing at National Festival this year. You got married. You've got a baby. Mm-hmm. Just talk a little bit about what this time of your life is like right now.
A whirlwind. I think my life looks drastically different than it did. We talk about two eras, right? The pre-pandemic and post-pandemic now. And while everything was sort of at a standstill in a lot of places during the pandemic, it just wasn't for me. We were lucky that at Ravenwood specifically, I was there long enough to kind of get some traction going before the pandemic. So we put some pretty intentional systems in place to make sure that when we came out on the other side of the pandemic, we were going to be bigger and better than we were going in. And I think that we accomplished that. And that's a testament to our students and parents and staff. But then also during the pandemic is when I reconnected with my wife, who I went to high school with. So yeah, man, I mean, the last it's been a little crazy. So coming out of the pandemic, we were really able to just hit the ground running, where a lot of people, I feel like, rightfully so, were rebuilding. We just weren't. We just kept moving forward. And so I really credit, what we're able to do right now to what we did during the pandemic.
Talk about what some of those systems that you mentioned, what are you talking about when you say that? What are the things you put in place during the pandemic that paid dividends later?
I think in a lot of facets of life, people were just more focused on the things that they could not do, because now we're in a pandemic and we cannot do XYZ. And we just had the mindset approach of what can we do? What are the things that we can do? Yeah, and so full ensemble things were things that we could not do. But instead of boohoo and cry about it, people have been telling me for years, Greg Snyder specifically was like, man, if you can get chamber music going, your groups are going to get a whole lot better. Mm. And we did tons of chamber music. We did tons of chamber music during the pandemic. We did a jazz band during class time, which we don't have at Ravenwood. And a lot of just focus on the individual musician and growing them and, working through that mid-state music in the fall. And so I think the combination of those things, the chamber music aspect, playing some jazz, which exposed the kids to a different kind of, playing and reading, and then individual focus, man, they were so much stronger coming out of the pandemic. We're like, oh, maybe Greg Snyder was right.
He might know a couple of things. So talk about how the kids reacted to chamber music, because I could be wrong, because I've done chamber music a lot in my time, and I wonder about, I talk to my friends about it, and sometimes they seem like to have some questions or whatever. I don't know if it's because it's a lot of work on the director's part, but how did the kids respond to playing in chamber groups?
Um, I think conceptually it was an easy sell because again, I think we sort of had the kids bought into what we were doing. They were already seeing progress. And so when everything kind of shut down and we were just like, okay, kids, this is what we're going to do. Had we not been in the midst of a global pandemic, I don't know that it would have been super as well received,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
But because this is what we had to do, I just believe that, like, as a teacher, if you firmly believe like this is the best thing for your kids, if they know that you care about them, you can tell them we're going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if the proof is in the pudding, then they're going to go do it. But it was different because most of our kids, I'm late to the chamber music game. Most of our kids had never done that before. So it was much more involved than just giving them chamber music pieces. We had to teach them what that was and teach them what that process is. And, this is how you listen to each other. This is how you start the piece together. This is how you're going to rehearse it. I mean, we had to teach them how to do it. So it wasn't just, here's the music, go play in your brass quintet, And again, that's something that's paid dividends now because if you were to watch our wind ensemble perform now, in chamber music, like there's a lot of like motion in the body.
Mm.
And watching each other for entrances, not necessarily like, it's not about watching the conductor when the clarinets all have to enter in on a piano dynamic in the lower register. Like, it's not about that. And they learned those things through playing in chamber music. So big dividends for sure.
That's the Berlin Phil. That's the Berlin Phil way. They're such an organic ensemble. Tom Berrier talks about that. He and Robin Fountain wrote that book about ensemble playing, and it's exactly what you're talking about there. Just that sense of organic playing, watching the kids watching each other, and them being invested, in their parts and in their responsibilities. That's
a crazy good book. And we've been lucky to have Tom come in a couple of times. And pretty much every time he comes in, he talks about the motion and like, where is the motion happening and how are we responding to it and pointing out different people. So we subscribe to that hardcore, no doubt.
That's cool. Okay, let's talk about National Festival a little bit. So, you're playing in the Music for All National Concert Band Festival in March up in Indianapolis. Let's talk about this because I would love for a lot more Tennessee bands to be a part of this event. I was fortunate to be a part of it and thought it was great. Comparing it to Grand Nationals, I thought it was as good or better in terms of just an event. So just talk about, like, when did you start thinking about applying? What was the selection process like? Just talk about that for a second.
Sure. Well, and I agree with you. I think a lot of people think Music for All or Bands of America and they think marching band, which is true. I mean, there's a ton of offerings for marching band, but I would say that they have a ton of offerings for the concert band side of things and chamber groups as well. And I agree. I think more people just need to take a deep dive into that, not be afraid of, the Bands of America marching band circuit. So I pretty regularly attend their summer symposium up at Ball State. And it's a camp for kids, but it's also obviously a professional development for directors too. And I think you encouraged me to go for the first time. I went to that camp as a kid when I was in high school, and you were like, man, you got to go to this. You got to go check this out. And so I did. And you said it was going to change the way I look at teaching, and it did. And I keep going back. And I think the more times I go back to that, the more ideas I get for not only things to do in the classroom, but other events that I could expose the kids to. And the National Festival was definitely one of them. I think Glenn Fugit came in to work with the kids a couple years ago. And he said, man, if you're not, making tapes for National Festival or for Midwest, like you got to start thinking about doing that. And I didn't think we were ready for that. Like you just put your head down, you just do the work and hope that you're making progress. But that's sort of how that came to be, just getting encouraged by some other folks. And, Ravenwood attended quite a few years back. And so that's something that I knew was a possibility, but definitely took some work to get there for sure.
Talk about that. You didn't feel like you were ready. I think I always tried to do things a little bit before I was ready. Like perhaps even this podcast, like I don't have a lot of training, it's just, I've listened to several podcasts, but like, I think that's important for you for us as people to jump into stuff before you are quote unquote ready. Can you talk about that for a second?
Man, I don't remember who said the phrase. It might have been Saucedo, who was just like, man, if you wait until you're ready, you won't ever do it. So I think it's just taking a bird's eye view of what you've got going on and trusting that, if you have the right systems in place and the kids are bought in and are doing the work themselves, then do something that is sort of a measure of that progress. Whether, we bring in guest conductors all the time, and some of that is to help the kids get better, and some of that's to help us as teachers get better, because we don't get that professional development from our administrators or that feedback. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like, just if you wait till you're ready, you're never going to do it. So you might as well take a shot in the dark and see what happens.
And in today's world, where the kids get so focused on, the perfection of a photo that's posted on social media, and that perfectionism can be so damaging for students to try things. For them to see you bringing in someone to coach you and to be vulnerable, then that just sort of sets the baseline for what their expectations for themselves can be. So I mean, so much about you're such a charismatic person, and I know the Ravenwood Band has grown in numbers because of your personality, but also you're doing things that speak to them as humans, that allow them to feel like they're growing and accomplishing things in your program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think, there's two growth aspects, right? You're talking about growth in numbers and growth in quality. And unfortunately, some people just get so locked in on growing in numbers that they don't focus on the quality aspect. So then you might have a lot more kids in band, but maybe, there's something that's missing with that, whether it's a musical achievement thing or a culture thing, both of which I think are super, super important. So again, just being really intentional about that. We knew we were going to experience growth, like that. We knew that 6 years ago that we were going to have growth. And if we didn't coach the kids, again, both musically and culturally, we were going to have a problem. So we're on the right track.
Yeah,
for sure.
What's the preparation for a national festival like for you? You've picked your program, obviously. What has to happen between now and March for you, in terms of not just like what the band plays, but like there's paperwork to fill out and things like this? Like, what does that process look like between now and March?
Honestly, man, like Music for All has made the paperwork aspect rather easy. I mean, obviously there's hotel lists and all that stuff, and we're responsible kind of for our own transportation, but they book the hotels. That like the itinerary is pretty laid out for us. There's not really a ton of planning that we really have to do, which is great, right? Like that's what we want. Like we want to be able to just focus on giving the kids the best possible experience possible without stressing about the logistics or preparing that music or playing that program. Like we've got to play 45 minutes worth of music, and that's a lot. A lot of high school bands, unless they've played at the state conference or an event like this before, that's a lot of music, and we want to get to that event and let the kids just have fun. Yeah. Like, here's the music, you've prepped it, let's have fun. And logistically, same thing. Like, we all do that with our marching band stuff, or when we go on trips? It's like, let's do all the prep work on the front end, so when we get there, we can just be present and be there for the kids, and have it just be an awesome time.
What are you doing? You're playing 45 minutes worth of music. How long is your class period?
So we're lucky with the wind ensemble class that we have all of those students in our homeroom, and then the class period immediately follows. So we have the 20-minute homeroom period and then about 50 minutes. So it ends up being about an hour and 15 minutes worth of rehearsal time every day.
That's great.
Which is a huge blessing.
Yeah, just because really running the whole program is such a different thing than, hey, let's play from A to D. Just how much they have to be on and responsible mentally for that long of concentration. That's great that you get that time.
Well, that was something that we talked about going into the break. The kids were like, are we going to get a chance to play all this music like together, like to see what the flow is going to be like? And we have that built into our rehearsal schedule. There's a couple of days we're just going to play the program top down. We're going to do a sort of a send-off concert to be able to get a real flow of it too. But Yeah, that was something that the kids voiced their opinions about. They're like, man, this is going to be tricky. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. It's going to be fun though.
good. And they're excited about it?
I think so. I think they're really pumped. They were super excited to find out when I told them in the fall. And then we've just had small little conversations as we've gone about what does this actually mean? What does this accomplishment mean for you? And where is this going to lead us going into the future? This
Yeah.
is by no means any sort of arrival point. It's a pretty good, you know, checkpoint. It's pretty cool to get this invite, but what's next?
Yeah.
Except for that.
I love that festival because it is so kid focused, and so oftentimes band events are director focused, and it's really about. I mean, if we're trying to grow, music as an art form with students in schools, it needs to be kid focused, and the fact that the kids you're going to be scheduled to go listen to some concerts, right? You have to listen to other groups play, and other groups are scheduled to listen to you play. Do you know who you're listening to at this point? Who you're going to hear?
I don't know that. We have not gotten that part of the schedule.
Yeah.
But man, put us in there with any of the people on that list, and our kids are going to hear some good stuff. And that's like another problem with what we do, right? Is our kids rarely get to see or
Yes.
hear anyone else. We spend all marching band season watching bands from the back. Like, well, so we see all the choreo from the back. We don't really hear anybody. And then during all that concert performance assessment stuff, yeah, we rarely get to hear anybody. So the
Yeah,
fact
because
that
you got
that's
bus
something-
schedules. You have
yeah,
7 minutes to play your program, and then 13
yeah,
seconds to get on the bus so you can make it
hurry
back for
up
the
and get on the
routes.
bus.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I mean, the list of folks who are playing, I mean, we play right before Blue Springs in Missouri, who was just a Grand National finalist.
They're pretty good.
They're pretty solid. Plano in Texas, Conroe, Texas, Richardson, Texas. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a bunch of Texas groups, Blue Springs, and us.
Yeah.
Which
That's
is cool.
great. So, Chris, you are an incredible recruiter. You've got to be the most charismatic high school band director I've probably ever met. So, what are
I
your
appreciate
models? Like, how did you get to this? How did this happen? I guess.
Uh, the system that we have for doing that, it started when I was teaching at Antioch High School over in Metro Nashville, and sort of charged with the same thing, like let's grow the program in numbers and quality. Well, how are you going to do that? I'm a relationship person, man. I'm a piano player first, and then a real bad percussionist.
Hmm.
So I don't hang my hat on the pedagogy at all. I hang my hat on the culture and the relationship building. And so again, things that we started at Antioch and still do it at Ravenwood, we have time built into our curricular class schedule for us to be at the middle schools. So I spend 2 days a week in the middle schools. My assistant Rob spends 2 days at the middle schools. And that's unless there's funky schedule or something going on like that, that's pretty average. And we are there to help in whatever way possible. Sometimes we're pulling out kids for sectionals. Sometimes we're just being an extra set of eyes and ears in the band room. But it's about building relationships. So the kids know, like, oh, there's the high school band director. Like, hey, when you go to band next year, that's your band director.
Yeah.
It's not, well, if you do band, it sort of just becomes this natural progression. And so we're lucky to have that. Not everybody's got it, but man, like take a day and go work. Because it pays off. And then at the end of the year, when those eighth graders go to register, I meet with every eighth grade child one-on-one. And I talk to them about high school mostly. Hey, like you're going to have a 6-minute meeting with your high school counselor is going to come over here. What else do you want to know about high school? What are you worried about? What questions do you have about classes and things? And oh, by the way, what are you thinking about band?
Yeah.
Band's the last thing. Like, let's talk about everything else. I'm going to let you know that I really care about what you got going on. And now let's talk about band. You think about doing it? What's driving that decision? What's making you nervous about it? And then I follow up with all those parents, everyone, whether they said they're going to do it or they're on the fence or it's a hard no. I send an email to every parent. So it's so much time, but want more kids in the program or not? Like,
Yeah.
the decision you
got to do the work.
Yeah.
And with counselors too, and I'm sure you do this. the counselors have an immense job. They've got to schedule all those kids for classes. And if you've ever seen your assistant principal that's in charge of scheduling, that matrix on their wall with all the classes, like it hurts my head even thinking about it.
No doubt.
But I would guess you do this. We did this a lot, is that we try to give the kids, ammunition's the wrong word, but like a heads up on, hey, when you meet with your counselor, these are the kind of things you need to say to make sure that your band schedule works out the way that you want it to, because they're so under the pressure to get all those classes scheduled and whatnot. So what kind of stuff do you do with that? Do you have anything like that you help them with before they meet with their counselors?
100%. And you talk about, building relationships with the kids and with their parents too, but we've got good relationships with our counselors at school too. Like when I've got a few minutes, I make a lap through the counseling office just to go be present and just to say, hey. And, luckily a couple of our counselors are coaches for the cheer team. So we spend a lot of time together in the fall anyway. But that is something, David, that we do is a lot of the kids are worried about, they get that course sign-up sheet. Like, I only have this many slots and what do I do? And so I sit there and build their schedule. And I go, look, like, here's how you can do this. And you can do band and you're able to do this. And sometimes it's, you want to take all these different electives your freshman year, and you don't have to do that. Like, this class will be here waiting for you when you're a senior and you don't have nothing to do because you've front loaded yourself so much. So 100%, here's what your schedule could look like this year and next year, and see how you can do all these things. Oh, I never thought about that. I know. That's why I'm helping you here.
I've done this before. And that also, like, when you do something like that for a kid and their parents, they get a sense of being cared for. It's almost like hospitality. You've taken the time to help them with something that they're about to do. And if they're a first-time high school parent, like, what a relief that is for them, right? And then they feel so connected to your program too. Like, there's the sense of just being more a part of something where somebody's thought of something ahead of time for them. You know what I'm saying? I'm rambling. I'm totally going to edit all this part out. So.
Yeah, well, I think sort of to that point too is, talking about building connections with eighth grade parents, especially the ones that maybe don't have older students. I start regular communications with them in the fall because we host, an eighth grade night with the marching band, like most people do. But then we do another event geared towards concert band in February. And so there's always sort of a reason for me to be sending information to those parents. And then when Ravenwood does their, rising freshman night, they bring all the parents in and they talk about Ravenwood and talk about graduation requirements and AP classes and all of this. We host a reception for all the band families before that. And we go, okay, you're about to get a lot of info, but here's what you need to know about this before you go do that. And we bring in the guidance counselors to that reception and say, this is how you can do band. There's not really a scenario where if your kid wants to do band, that it's impossible. And we're super grateful for those counselors to come in and do that because, they've already got a bunch of stuff going on and sort of help us is really great. So that's just another thing we do in those recruiting efforts.
That's really good. And then those counselors are your cheerleaders too. Like they're advocating for you as well because you've taken the time to invite them in. They want to have those kind of conversations. They want to, because the more work they do, it's the same thing for us as band directors. The more the work they get to do in February, it solves their problems in August, So yeah, that's really very, very smart. As we say in Tennessee, you're not from around here. So can you talk a little bit about your story? You have such a unique story for someone who's now a high school band director. So let's hear it.
Oh, now I'm curious about what part you think is unique, because I think I'm just another one of those people that's living in Tennessee that ain't from here. I grew up on the west side of Michigan in Holland. I went to school at Western Michigan University. I knew I wanted to be a band director when I was in eighth grade because I met my high school band director, who was really a father figure to me as I was growing up. And so he was the reason I wanted to be a band director. And in eighth grade, I never looked back. I wanted to be a garbage truck driver, and then I wanted to be a bus driver, and then I wanted to be a band director, and that was it. So went to Western Michigan University. I just had an unbelievable experience there. I had some really, really good support systems while I was there. I was a piano major, so I think there was two of us that were instrumental music education majors that were piano majors. So was a percussionist all through band, but my passion was playing the piano. And percussion was just sort of something I did because I had to be in band. But again, just a great support system while I was there. David Montgomery was one of my big mentors when I was there. He's at Baylor now. But just really believed in me and believed in, you say charismatic, some people would say crazy and too energetic and unfocused. And
it's a fine line.
Yeah, sure. And Dr. Montgomery was just like, man, you can do this. You just got to tighten some things up. You have to learn some things, but you'll be fine. I taught in that area following school. And when I moved to Tennessee, I wasn't really looking to make a move. I followed somebody at the school that I taught at up in Michigan, just outside of Kalamazoo, Mattawan High School, who'd been there a long time. And it was a place where I really felt like maybe some motion could be made towards Bands of America stuff, Music for All, just sort of evolving the program a little bit. And the program just wasn't ready to do those things. And I was, so that was just a little bit frustrating. And so I'd visited Nashville a couple of times with my sister, who's my best friend. And I was like, well, let's go do that. I'm just going to go move to Nashville and, piano player, singer, not really songwriter at all. But I was like, man, I could play some gigs. I could do that and I could teach. And so that's kind of what brought me here. Taught at Antioch for 4 years and then ended up at Ravenwood. So I don't know if that's the unique part that you were looking for. If you have
Yeah, that is. How does being a piano player help you as a high school band director? How does being a piano player, does it hurt you in any way? Talk a little bit about that. Like when you look at a score, I would imagine you see it differently than I do. I'm a trumpet player, so I'm looking. I just think for so oftentimes for me, it passes through that filter first, and then I have to zoom out and look at it. Oh, I have to conduct this music. You know what I mean? So, like as a pianist, how do you look at a score differently than maybe somebody else does? Do you know? Can you answer that?
I don't know because I look at it the way that I've always looked at it. I look at it like it's open score, almost like a choir octavo, and so I'm looking, baseline first. I'm thinking harmonically, and so maybe some people would refer to that as being horizontally, maybe. And so I feel like I look at things much more that way. And so the complicated part for me is then getting into the vertical axis and trying to, as not a wind player, trying to help those students as someone who's never played one of those. And I've spent a ton of time my first couple of years just taking instruments home. Let me figure out how to make all the bad sounds on this clarinet. So when a kid does it, I know what they're doing. And took a whole bunch of time. But I think there are advantages too, because I have heard, great intonation, since I was in second grade. Like I know what that is. And so I think that's an advantage, but then also the horizontal musical phrases, like being able to hear those, because I always had to express those myself, blend and balance like between the hands as a piano player. So I think there are advantages and disadvantages for sure, but I just lean on the advantages and work really hard to close the gap in the disadvantages.
Yeah. So what's your national festival program, Chris? What are you playing?
For National Festival, we're playing Landscapes by Galante, the Markowski Elixir, the Hearthstone, Julie Giroux, Alex Shapiro, Tight Squeeze, the new Unbroken by Randall Standridge, and probably a march of sorts, probably the 552nd. Yeah.
What do you like about it? What do the kids think? What's their favorite? What's the thing that's going to take the most time? Talk about some of those things.
It's a super diverse program, not only in, the way that the music sounds, but I feel like a lot of these composers, I pulled off a list I got at Midwest a couple of years ago of, underrepresented composers. We tend to play music in the band world by composers that all look the same. And Barry Krause at Belmont just did a really interesting study about why people pick music. That's a whole other podcast episode in itself. So I think the kids appreciate the diversity of the program. I think they're enjoying playing a lot of the stuff. The most challenging, I think, is going to be that new Standridge piece, Unbroken. It's about 15 minutes long, which is a little bit bigger of a bite than we've chewed. We just don't play super long pieces, for better or worse. And so I think putting that together might be the most challenging for us.
Yeah. Just the amount of time it takes for kids to concentrate for that long it's just tough.
And again, that was something that they were concerned about. They said, Mr. J, this piece is like 15 minutes long. How are we going to rehearse this? Well, chunks at a time, then big chunk, and spend days running the whole thing.
Yeah, just like marching band kids, honestly. You do page 1 to page 2, and then page 1 to page 5, and then page 1 to whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep, same concept.
What do you say to folks that are like undergrads or even your high school kids that are thinking about music ed, or young teachers? What are you thinking about now that you've got some time in the profession? What are you thinking about as a leader for what the young hopefuls need to hear?
Oh man, there's just so much to learn and so much to know that you're just unaware of when you finish that undergrad degree. I always thought that there's a book to be written here, stuff you didn't learn in music school, and I think that people should lean a little bit more on the building culture side of things and building relationship side of things. And it's not really like I don't know if you can teach that, or you can at least talk about it or read some books or something. But I think there's people who the ceiling is a lot higher than the floor is low, I think. And so there's a lot of people who get their first job or two and don't ask anybody for help. They don't call on anybody for help. And I don't know that there's anything more dangerous that you could do for yourself and for your students, more importantly, than to call people and just ask for help. I was really lucky when I was at Antioch. I got to work with Greg Snyder and Mike Scioto for a couple of years, and it was teaching 101 every day. I got feedback on my teaching all of the time. And so just not everybody's going to have that situation, but call somebody up, have somebody come, like, be in the band room. There's awesome people like you who are willing to do that, to go help people, but focus on the culture and ask for help. I guess those would be the two pieces I would offer.
Yeah, the culture thing the older I got, became so much of a huge thing for me. I think and it has to be this way, I suppose, in terms of just what undergraduate like course loads are like. It's got to be so pedagogic, and there's so much to learn about teaching pedagogy, not just woodwind pedagogy. But I think culture kind of gets pushed out of that, and that's the thing that really, it's the water that it's the water in the ocean. It's the air and that we breathe. It's what makes things move down the road, and all the other little snippets of information that the kids need only matter with the context of that culture, right? When the kids feel like they're in a place that's safe for them, when they feel like they can grow and thrive because of a culture that's been intentionally established. Lots of programs, I think, have a culture that they sort of fall into by accident, good or bad. But when you can really design the culture of your program, like I know you've done at Ravenwood, man, you have done something that will create a sense of energy that's bigger than just one person can do. You know what I mean? Is that?
Yeah. And that's something that David Montgomery used to always say. He said, man, hang your hat on. The kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that has been the driving force in my teaching since I started 15 years ago. No doubt.
Well, Chris, this has been great. I'm so glad you've come on. And I think we should do another podcast after you've played at National Festival. I want to hear the wrap up. I want to hear what your kids thought. I want to hear, what the experience was like. Because again, the more groups that we have from Tennessee that are able to do that event, or either the other affiliate events that are happening around the area. You know, there's one at Belmont that Barry Krause is hosting this year. There's one up at O'Fallon that's not too far. There's been some down in Cobb County and Atlanta as well. Those affiliate festivals are a great sort of introduction into doing the Music for All National Festival, because Music for All provides some of their judges, their top level judges, to go and do those sort of satellite events. So you're getting that feedback that's sometimes not common in your just local concert festival. You're getting Dick Floyd or folks like that. And so I hope more folks will follow your lead here and jump into the deep end of the pool with National Festival, because it'll be great for Tennessee bands. And again, even though they might feel like they're not ready for it, that's the time to do it, before you're ready.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I really appreciate the conversation and for asking me to be a part of this podcast. And, just before I go quick, I want to brag on the kids, because I am one member of the ensemble. And it is their work, it's their passion, it's their drive, and their buy-in to the culture that has gotten us to where we are today. I can't do that alone, So big love to those kids, for all the work that they're doing. I love them so much. And I'm so proud of what they've been able to do these last few years. And it's a true testament to them and their hard work. So love them a whole bunch.
Yeah, what a great story. Thanks, Chris, so much.
Thanks for having me, David. Appreciate it.
Good luck. If you're interested in hearing Chris's program for National Festival, then check our show notes. You'll find a YouTube link there with all of their selections. We wish Chris and the Ravenwood Wind Ensemble nothing but the best as they go into their final preparations to perform at this year's National Concert Band Festival. Thanks for listening to Bandstand. If you have topic suggestions or need to get in touch with us, email us at tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Your input is important to us, and if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss about the past, present, or future of Tennessee bands, please let us know. Again, that email is tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Right now we're broadcasting on Spotify and YouTube, so please subscribe, review, and rate. Box 5, please. And more importantly, share this podcast with your friends. See you next week.